Hello everyone! I recently had the opportunity to watch All the Light We Cannot See, the 2023 adaptation of the novel by Anthony Doerr. It is a Netflix exclusive. As some of you may know, I don't subscribe to Netflix, but my brother got it for 1 month, and while I had access, I decided to check out a couple things, including this miniseries. All the Light We Cannot See is a World War II story set on the occupied island of Saint-Malo, where the lives of a blind French girl and a German radio operator collide during the Allied bombings. The 4-hour adaptation stars Aria Mia Loberti and Lewis Hoffman, with Lars Eidinger, Hugh Laurie, and Mark Ruffalo. It is based on Anthony Doerr's best-selling novel, which was published in 2014. I don't normally go for bestsellers, but this book was everywhere. It was so highly praised. It made me curious, and when I read the blurb, it grabbed my attention. So I read it in 2016, and I actually filmed a review of it. That was a long time ago. I don't expect anyone to remember. I was doing book videos on a regular basis back then, and I've completely forgotten about some of those videos, but I do remember recording that one because it was tricky. I had some very strong feelings, and I had to figure out a way to convey them without spoiling the book. I knew then that there was bound to be a screen adaptation someday. This was just begging for it. I don't know why it took so long. So I approached this miniseries as someone who has read the book, but did so 9 years ago. And I'm extremely divided in my opinion. It was fine, it was okay, but either way I look at it, it's got some flaws. And it's not a clear case of, well, if you look at it as a standalone work, it's fine, but as an adaptation, it stinks. Or the reverse of that. If you look at it as an adaptation, it's great, but as a standalone work, like as just a film, it stinks. It's very much a mixed bag, and there are a couple things about which I have very strong feelings. Here are some compliments to start with. I approve of it getting the miniseries treatment as opposed to being squeezed into 2 hours. It's kind of a big book that covers a lot of ground, even though the primary focus is one relatively short span of time, and I think the longer format works well. I thought it was nice that the main titles appear to use the same font as the book cover, and the model of Saint-Malo is cool and well crafted. They did a good job with that. The lead performances are good. Aria Mia Loberti as Marie Laure does a fine job, and it's great that they cast someone who's really blind to play the protagonist. The little girl who plays Marie as a child is blind as well. Lewis Hoffman as Werner Pfennig is also good. They're both compelling characters. The only thing with him that I found distracting is in the flashbacks, where he's much older than I think he's meant to be. I thought he was supposed to be a boy when he's taken to the Institute. Hugh Laurie is good. There's some nuance in his interpretation, bringing more warmth and personality to what could easily have become a caricature. Mark Ruffalo, my mom and I kind of argued about this one. His accent is so distractingly not good that it's really hard to determine if his acting otherwise was okay or not. But my main problem where the acting's concerned has to do with the bad guys. They're cookie-cutter Hollywood Nazis. My mom pointed out that they all look so similar, she couldn't tell the difference between most of them, except for the main villain, a jewel collector obsessed with finding this mystical diamond he believes will cure his terminal illness. He was so over the top with his stupid countdowns, his ugly floppy hair, his pale sweaty face, his deranged eyes. He was like a cartoon character. But in all fairness, all the bad guys are cartoonish. They all do this thing where they're like, I'm going to speak quietly and slowly, with great deliberation, so that you're hanging on to my every word, and then I'm suddenly going to scream in your face! Sorry. That happened over and over again, and everyone does it. All the bad guys do it. Same with suddenly pulling out a gun. That's a thing that happens in a lot of movies and shows, and it can be effective. But it's not so effective when it's overdone. I had some other issues with the script. The dialogue is a little obvious at times. It's heavy-handed with the messaging. Some of the lines are ham-fisted, also a bit corny. Really trying to hammer in the message. I want to make sure that the audience gets it. And I feel like, what do you think, we're stupid? Also, one of the biggest takeaways from the book is that Doerr writes some beautiful poetic prose. And for one reason or another, maybe it's just because of the medium, that's not really here. Apparently, I'd forgotten about the professor and all things related to that, but as I was watching, at a certain point, I was pretty sure about the professor's identity. It seemed fairly obvious, so when it was revealed so dramatically, that seemed strange. And another thing that bugged me, which is kind of a writing issue, kind of a pacing or editing issue, is that there are many times where momentum builds and builds and builds and builds, and then it cuts away, usually to a flashback, or it might cut away to another character. And you're back down to zero, and the momentum has to start building again, and it builds and builds and builds, and then we cut away, and we have to go start all over again, and this became kind of exhausting. It is a natural part of television writing, I get that, but it made certain sequences feel, unnecessarily dragged out and broken up. Now, maybe they were trying to emulate the book's style. The book has very short chapters with alternating perspectives, so this does happen in the book. But while you're never with one person for too long, you're also never away from one person for too long. And while it was fragmented, it still felt cohesive. More cohesive than the film, especially in the big moment, the part you've been waiting for. Just in general and all around, that felt more exciting and more fulfilling in the book. Despite everything, though, believe it or not, I did like this well enough, and I was pleased with those climactic, long-awaited moments. I like Marie and Werner's scenes together. There's a shy sweetness about them that's very appealing, and I found that portion very in line with what I recalled from the book. Speaking of what I recalled from the book, though, watching this adaptation, I quickly found myself asking, is my memory terrible, or did they make a ton of changes? There were so many things that didn't ring a bell here. I already mentioned one or two, but there was much more than that. So many, not just little details, but major storylines, subplots, characters. I know 9 years is kind of a long time, but wow! I'd forgotten all about the diamond, which is huge. I remembered that the obsessed German was tracking down Marie for some reason, but that whole thing with the diamond just... Probably because that was one aspect of the book that I wasn't into. What was more shocking than the presence of things I'd apparently forgotten, though, was the absence of things I did remember. If you mention this book to me, if I come across this title anywhere, there are 4 things that immediately flash into my brain. The bathtub filled with drinking water, the scene with the can of peaches, the abuse of the nice boy at the school, and a certain character's fate. That's the thing that pops into my head first, actually. I went in reverse order. We got the bathtub, we got the peaches, but the 2 most scarring parts of the book that left an indelible impression on my mind, they're gone. They're just not there. If you've read the book, I'm sure you know the parts I'm referring to. Werner's classmate is subjected to monstrous, merciless treatment with horrific results. Now, this isn't crucial to the plot, and the adaptation does show some really awful hazing, but it's not nearly as bad, and this thing with the friend is significant to Werner's character development, and there's an aspect of this storyline that he needs to atone for. I think they tried to substitute this very vague thing that he was forced to do in its place, and it's not the same. And later on, there's a chapter that's incredibly sad, and this whole side story would be the most awful, gut-wrenching thing in the book if it weren't for something else very shocking that happens near the end. As the miniseries began to conclude, I was aghast. I couldn't believe it was wrapping up like this. I kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and then the credits rolled. Anyone who's read the book knows that is not where the story ends. It goes on, and something happens that is startling at first, and then when you register that, yes, that really just happened, it makes you want to throw the book. I'll always remember how appalled, devastated, and infuriated I was by this thing. And then also the fact that Doerr makes it worse with a surprisingly dull anticlimax. So when I finished the book, I didn't know how to rate it. Some things I loved, other things, ugh! Now, here's where it gets complicated, because I wasn't looking forward to these two parts. I was dreading them. I sat there for 4 hours bracing for them. So when they didn't come, shouldn't I have been relieved? This outcome is much better. It's more hopeful, more peaceful, and if you loathe what Doerr did, this is like wish fulfillment. I watched this a few days ago, and I'm still trying to process my feelings. Am I annoyed that I was spared the agony? Am I outraged that I didn't have to go through that again, and that other viewers are blissfully unaware? Am I scornful that the adaptation gave the story a happier ending, the ending that I would have preferred? I shouldn't be. I should be glad. I should be grateful. And yet, I don't know, I'm just very confused and conflicted. On its own, the miniseries is fine. It's not perfect, but I think it's adequate, and there are some parts that are decidedly better than others. If I hadn't read the book, I would probably have liked it more. Well, who can say? I don't know, but there's a good chance I would have liked it more. And it's just crazy that I have this about it, because they removed parts that upset me and made it more palatable. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the adaptation of All the Light We Cannot See, Such As They Are. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this one, so if you're familiar with it, go ahead and leave your comment below. I expect opinions to be divided. This has a 7.5 on IMDb, but a 27% Rotten Tomatoes score, so people are all over the place. It's gonna be interesting. I'll be back next weekend with another video. Thanks for watching.